I'm Christy.
And I'm Kathy.
And this is The Psychic
And the Skeptic. Welcome back to The Psychic and the Skeptic. And on this episode, we're celebrating our country's 250th anniversary with a special tribute to the ghosts of the American Revolution.
Can you believe it's been 250 years? Happy birthday, America. Dang, you're getting old.
Now, aren't you getting old if you think 250 years?
That's true. I'm very young compared to that.
Geez, 250 years goes by quite fast, Christy.
Right?
In comparison, obviously, to the rest of the world, that's a very brief amount of time.
That's true, because there's so many other countries that have been around for way longer than we have. Besides that, I would want to live to be 250. Just shoot me and put me out of my pain already, please.
Well, if you become a ghost, you'll probably get to see 250 years from now.
Probably.
So many paranormal investigators believe that locations where people experience extreme fear, pain, hope, and even determination can retain that emotional energy. And as we've covered in our series on the ghosts of the Civil War, we are pausing for a moment to recognize the Revolutionary War. And not just as a military conflict, but a deeply personal struggle involving families, neighbors, communities, all divided by their loyalty to the British Crown and the dream and the hope for independence, which started this whole migration here to North America.
Yeah, nobody wants to be under somebody else's rule. You want to live your own life. And I think that's what made America so special, is that it's the right to liberty, right to freedom. And so we can say what we want to do, and that matters.
Right. And the religious freedom was the primary reason for settling here in 1620 with the Pilgrims and their landing in Plymouth, Massachusetts.
From a historical standpoint, you've got this emotional intensity. And this is one of the main reasons that we have these ghost stories that survive year after year. So in this episode, what we're hoping is that we can cover, make it interesting, of course, but cover some of these more famous battle sites of the Revolutionary War. Then we're going to discuss these ghosts that are seen, like the Screaming Lady and other ones that are really interesting.
As usual, we need to cover a little
history. We're dorks. We know it.
And probably refresh some of our memories as we enter into this 250th anniversary celebration across the United States. We should really understand where it all began before we get into the spooky ooky ghosts of the American Revolution.
By the way, before we get started, hi, Jill.
Right? We can't pull out the hot dogs and the hamburgers and the fireworks until we have a deeper understanding and a respect for the background of our nation.
I think a lot of kids nowadays think, oh, 4th of July, it's fireworks. You got to teach your kids really what it's all about.
I think a good number of families in America are pretty good about raising their kids to respect the nation. But we do have a divided nation these days. And I think some of that is due to the fact that a lot of our history has been removed and replaced with other priorities in our education system.
Politically correct stuff.
Right. I don't want to go too deep into that, but I think that's true across the world, too. I think people are getting away from their origins and the roots of their nation for political goals of those who lead them.
I agree.
So to understand the conflict that created the American Revolution, we need to begin with the time period after the French and Indian War, which ended in 1763. This is when the British had accumulated a tremendous amount of debt and decided that the American colonies should help pay for their own defense. Because the British believed that it was fair for Americans to contribute, since the French-Indian War was fought to defend the colonies as well and open up western frontier for expansion. British officials argued that American colonists paid significantly fewer taxes than British citizens living in the UK, yet it had cost the crown millions in defense costs. So they enacted several unpopular laws, unpopular to the colonists, and some of those were the Sugar Act of 1764, the Stamp Act in 1765, and the Townshend Act of 1767. A lot of these trade regulations were put to curtail widespread smuggling, and ensure colonists were contributing to the economic stability of the empire. So here we are over here on the other side of the Atlantic, paying an exorbitant amount of taxes now. It's shifted and the scales tipped too far the other direction. Especially, the biggest issue was that this taxation was without representation. And that's a famous phrase that we all learn in grade school. No taxation without representation.
Yep.
We are part of a representative government. And it's wonderful now that both countries are allies and that we both have our own representation. Yet we have similar styles of government in that sense that we all got from each other. And we do have religious foundations in some of our laws and what we felt was just and right in building our nation. So the colonists were really leaning heavily on those values as well. So tensions were escalating, and a lot of this anger led to the Boston Massacre. This was in March of 1770, and British troops had moved into the Boston area to stifle some of the anger of the colonists from all these unfair taxes that were being imposed on them. And this led to troops killing 5 men in this square when there was an uprising that was occurring. The first to die was Crispus Attucks. He was African and indigenous, which is important to know because he became the hero of the American Revolution. He was the first person to die. This is where it was technically starting. And he was a sailor and a rope maker, which I think was what the other men killed did as well. This was near the wharf where the fishermen of the Boston area all worked and lived. He's a pretty well-known name in the Boston area when you talk about the Boston Massacre. He and the other 4 men were buried all in the same grave. I wasn't sure if you're aware of that.
No, I didn't know that at all.
I grew up an hour north of Boston and went to college there, and there's lots of shops and restaurants in the area of where the cemetery is that they're buried. It's very historic, very famous cemetery. It's right along the Freedom Trail. If anybody's ever visited Boston, you might have been there as well. It's where Benjamin Franklin's parents are buried in the same graveyard. It's right in the middle of a courtyard of some tall buildings in downtown Boston.
I remember you sending me some pictures of that.
Yeah, right there on Tremont Street. It's just really cool how some of the oldest graves in America are right there.
Yeah, but it's like the city just grew up around them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and their grave is marked by a memorial, and it's right there up front in the cemetery. So it's pretty prominent. It's a historical landmark for sure. It's the Granary Burial Ground, and their gravestone faces Tremont Street. Right across the street is the Samuel Adams Pub, and we've got shops in Park Street. It's like an outdoor mall in that area. So it's really a dichotomy of yesterday and today. When you walk anywhere in downtown Boston, it's really cool that way. I'm getting nostalgic just talking about it. And
I know you're like all smiling.
I'm getting like goosebumps just thinking about the history that's there and how awesome it was living there and going to school there.
So I wonder if that cemetery there is haunted.
Oh, I don't know. I would hope they've moved on by then.
I would hope so too, but have you heard any rumors since you grew up around that area?
Not from the graveyard specifically. It's probably pretty noisy at night with the restaurants and pubs there, especially on the weekend. I don't think you could do an EVP session there with the city traffic that goes by. It's a very busy street.
Yeah.
And it's near Government Center, or it's a struggle not to say Government Center. And the T station, the subway station, pops you up right there. So it's a metropolis there. So it's kind of noisy if you were to do any kind of ghost hunting. So maybe that's why we haven't heard of much.
Don't worry, you haven't lost all your yank. I can
Oh,
still
I know,
hear
it's
some of
coming.
it.
Yeah, we got the Boston Tea Party, which I can hear just the way I say that word. That happened in 1773, and I'm sure a lot of our friends have heard of that. This was in December, so it was pretty cold in the harbor.
In the
The
harbor?
Boston Harbor.
Oh my gosh.
This was a political protest where colonists destroyed 342 chests of British East Indian tea, and they dumped it into the harbor.
I'm going to smack her. Don't worry, folks. Before it's over with.
This is what's interesting. The value of all the tea that was damaged was 18,000 pounds, which in today's money is $3 million.
Oh, dang.
That's a
Ooh.
lot of tea.
Mm.
Talk about spilling the tea.
Now, see, we did learn about that in school, but I'm sure they went full in depth with you guys living.
Oh, we
in
took field trips
Massachusetts.
in elementary school to some of these places, and the old meeting house where they went and planned this whole tea party event, because it took some planning to get people together to dump all this tea. And they were in these big, heavy wooden crates. So it's not your Amazon packaging that we have today.
Right. They had some of their members dressed up like Native Americans to make it look like the natives were the one throwing it overboard. I remember that.
Yeah.
Hey, at least you got firsthand field trips and experience of all these historical places. We don't get that being here in the heartland.
I did get to take a trip out to London, and being a Bostonian myself, standing on some bridges there in London, it was very tempting to want to find a tea bag and just toss it over the bridge. Just
You're such a dork.
I'm a history nerd, but I wouldn't do that because they're our friends now. But
Chances are it'd end up whomping somebody in the head, causing some sort of massive damage, even though it's a tea bag. Gosh. After all this, no wonder you've got so many of these colonists, these original colonists who were just mad, pissed off, and just full of this intense emotion and fear and uncertainty, all sorts of emotions that went into play. So you can imagine as they get ready to start this war, they're all hyped up, right?
they murdered 5 people who were just colonists. And it really set the seriousness of what was going on, because there was no fighting that involved any deaths up until this point. So now it's like, this means war. The fear was that they would be enslaved by the British crown.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole point of coming to the new land was to form a new government. They wanted to separate themselves from any attachment so that they could decide what was best for them. And if they weren't going to be given representation to do that under the crown, they wanted to separate altogether and form our own nation. So you might have heard of a famous person called Paul Revere, or as we say in Boston, Paul Revere.
Lord.
There's a whole town just east of Boston named after him called the town of Revere. And Paul was one of the participants in the Tea Party, and he was a member of the Sons of Liberty, which is a group rallying against the British crown. And he was aware that there were British troops, about 700 of them, coming in to seize weapons from the colonists so they don't have a way to fight back. There was an alarm system that he and his group, the Sons of Liberty, had arranged using lanterns in the steeple of the Old North Church in downtown Boston. This is where that 1 if by land, 2 if by water came from, so that they knew where they were going to attack, whether they were coming by land or by sea. And so when he was alerted, he got on his horse and rode into Lexington, Concord area to warn people of the British that are coming. The famous term, the British are coming, the British are coming.
Right.
Which actually wasn't what he said. I'm not sure if you're aware. That's just what was written. The British troops were known as the regulars. So he was coming into town, and people were mad at him because he was shouting and making noise. And he said, quote, "Noise, you'll have noise enough before long. The regulars are coming out." I guess it's not as catchy as the British are coming, the British are coming.
So they changed it.
They changed it, I guess, for modern day folks who didn't understand the language of the regulars. Paul Revere crossed what's known as the Charles River, which I used to take walks and go running along that same river. And he rode into Lexington to warn his friends John Hancock and Samuel Adams, some names you've probably heard of before.
Right.
After Lexington, he and his fellow riders were intercepted by British officers. But the warning had already rippled across the countryside because this early alert had gotten to the local Minutemen, which were waiting on Lexington Green the next morning. So when the British arrived at dawn, both sides faced off, and an unknown person had fired that first shot. And this became famously known as, quote, the shot heard round the world. This was all showing that his warning was a critical turning point in the defense of the American colonists. And it marks the official start of the American Revolution.
So we'd like to go into some of these main sites that are said to be haunted.
Right, the top haunted locations associated with
the Revolutionary War.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this first one is George Washington and Mount Vernon.
So before George Washington became the first president of the United States, he was the commander of the Continental Army. And Mount Vernon was his plantation home, and it's located along the Potomac River in Virginia. Potomac River also runs through a bit of Maryland and into Washington, D.C. So he originally inherited this estate in 1761 and expanded it into a large agricultural operation or a plantation. During the Revolutionary War, he left Mount Vernon in 1775 to command the Continental Army. He fought several battles, but one real famous battle was the Battle of Bunker Hill. And this is in the north part of Boston in Cambridge, and there's a memorial on Bunker Hill that still sits there today. It looks a lot like the Washington Monument, but just much smaller in scale. He fought in that battle in June 1775. He was fighting against the British group that was led by General William Howe of Great Britain. What's interesting in this battle is technically the British won that battle at that time, but only because the colonists stood their ground and they killed off almost half of that British troop. Even though we didn't win, it proved that we could hold back and that we might even have a chance. British troops had to retreat a little bit at that point to regroup. They lost so many men in that fight, and both sides really had to recover. But there's a little bit of unknown history there that some of that retreat had to do with a smallpox outbreak during that time. Now, we were starting to use vaccine for smallpox in America at this time, but it was very controversial, foreshadowing of COVID times.
Mm-hmm.
Similar things. People were untrusting of it, but it really created a problem for both sides. So some of the British Army had to postpone certain battles because of their fear of losing more men due to smallpox. And same thing was happening for the colonists. So it really kind of delayed some of the fighting in certain areas. But it really kind of came about after this battle at Bunker Hill with George Washington. So nature was helping us in this war effort as well.
Right? That's interesting, though. I didn't know that about the smallpox.
Yeah. Howe announced that his British army was going to evacuate Boston because of this outbreak. So the high loss of life on both sides made any effort at peace between the Americans and the British virtually impossible because the resolve on both sides hardened. And it really accelerated the tensions between the British and the colonists. And even more so, it lit a fire under the Americans to achieve their independence. So I think it even helped us a little bit that we lost that battle at Bunker Hill. And because of the break that everybody had to take and the quarantining, it let us regroup to fight the war effort. But Mount Vernon is significant because of the attachment that George Washington had to his home and his plantation in Virginia. He didn't return to Mount Vernon until the war ended in 1783. And he eventually died at his home on Mount Vernon in December of 1799. He had some severe throat infection.
Yeah, and at least he got to spend 16 years after the war at his home, his
Right.
plantation.
And if I recall, I think it wasn't necessarily the infection that killed him. It was the bloodletting that they did
Mm-hmm.
to try to drain him of
The infection.
the infection, which probably developed into sepsis. And they didn't really understand infection very well at that time.
Right.
You can drain out the infection, but you drain a whole lot of blood in the process to
And
the
you
point
kill
where
'em.
the person can't sustain life.
Right. That was very common back then because, again, like you said, medical knowledge was very nilch. They didn't know a whole lot. So let's talk about some of these ghosts that are seen at George Washington's Mount Vernon. So you got these visitors that report, they think that George Washington's ghost is still there because they say they see this real tall figure wearing colonial military clothing and walking through the mansion. Now, my thoughts on that is, even if that was the case, George Washington lived there for 16 years after the war. Do you think he's really going to be dressed up in military clothing? Come on.
Well,
I'd be in my just pajama bottoms or something,
that's modern day, but even still today, ceremonially, if you're a general in a war, you wear your uniform to formal events, like to weddings or things that are even non-military.
But just around your house?
No, not around your house, but he also lived in a mansion.
Oh,
Maybe he had a lot of formal events. He was the first president,
right.
and there might have been a lot going on. But my thought actually went towards he wasn't serving in the military while he lived in Mount Vernon. He left for the war and didn't return until after the war.
Right.
But maybe, like what you say about psychic visions, that apparitions present themselves in the way they want to be remembered or the way that they're recognized. And maybe that's why. That's just my paranormal theory.
That, or maybe the visitors who report seeing this are not really seeing George Washington at all.
Who else would it be?
Could be anybody. Unless they can describe him to a T. If it's an apparition, you're going to get details, right?
Yeah.
So are they seeing the gray clothes? Are they seeing the gray hair? Are they seeing the face? What are the details of that? So that's what raises my questions with it. It could be him.
I'd say just because of the emotional connection to the place and it being your home, the highest likelihood that it would be an apparition of George Washington. But there's also the level of expectation when it comes to visitors to a historic location like that. Knowing it's George Washington's home, is this where we're creating these images with our brain just out of expectation?
That's where I was going next. Most of the pictures that you see of George Washington in history, he is in military uniform.
You sound like a skeptic.
We're trading roles here. Just saying.
I wouldn't say trading. I'm kind of with you on that one.
In addition to seeing this figure, guests also say they hear footsteps in the hallways. They feel a strong presence near Washington's bedroom and study. And they also see these unexplained shadows and feel these sudden drops in temperature. So, believers to the phenomenon think Washington's dedication to his home, his role in founding the nation, created this strong spiritual attachment to his place and property.
Yeah, because if he was fighting in a battle, he was probably always on the go. There wasn't any one place that he would call his home. And even as the first president, the nation's capital at the time was in Philadelphia. So it's not the White House that we're talking about. So his home in Philadelphia as the president was temporary.
Right.
So if you were to call any one place home, it would be Mount Vernon.
Right.
And there were writings in the time of missing home and mention of his home. So we knew it was in his heart. So it only makes sense that if his spirit lingered for any period of time, that would be the place. But as any old home would go, you've got old wood, you've got shifting temperatures with the way the home is insulated. Old wood can sag over time. And if you've ever walked in a historic, which I know you have, we did this past weekend, a really old building,
right,
that the wood floors can cave a little bit and they can temporarily stick in that depressed position and release over time, making noises that sound like footsteps behind you. And just the feeling that you get in an old home gives people that sensation and brings in those thoughts about historical figures, especially since there's pictures of George Washington everywhere and it's all his property. So you're thinking of George Washington, your memory is recalling an image of him. And then if the conditions in the environment exist just so, you can almost will this activity into existence. You see a strange image in the corner of your eye. The pareidolia effect causes you to think that you're seeing an apparition of George Washington.
Right. Well, let's move on then. We have the Battle of Brandywine and Fort Mifflin.
So the British launched a campaign to capture the American capital of Philadelphia. Spoiler alert, it moved to D.C. eventually. And this was called the Battle of Brandywine. Unfortunately, the British was the winner here under the same General Sir William Howe. But Washington's army eventually ended up retreating, and this allowed the British to occupy Philadelphia later that month.
Where's that boo sound clip that we can throw in there, right? Gotta do that. No offense, but
So controlling Philadelphia required Britain to control the Delaware River. And if you all know about the history of the Delaware River and George Washington crossing the Delaware, that became a big turning point. Fort Mifflin was built on Mud Island in the Delaware River to defend access to Philadelphia. In 1777, American soldiers under Major Samuel Smith held the fort against a massive British bombardment. The siege of Fort Mifflin had lasted from September 26th to November 16th, 1777. So the winner here was the British forces, and the Americans evacuated after the fort was reduced to ruins.
Oh, they had to run away.
Yeah, it was one of the most intense attacks of the Revolutionary War. Thousands of cannonballs and shells struck the fort, killing and injuring many defenders.
So Fort Mifflin is considered to be one of the most haunted Revolutionary War locations in America. And, of course, the most famous spirit there is called the Screaming Lady. Hey, Kathy, can you guess why she's called the Screaming Lady? Maybe she screams. Well, according to legend, here's her backstory. This woman was discovered at the fort after being attacked and then murdered. Now, they never really did find out who she was. They could never really prove it. And then there's all these stories that were different about the way and how and when she died. Now, witnesses to this location claim that they hear her terrifying screams, thus the Screaming Lady, but her screams echo all throughout this fort, particularly near the casemates and underground areas. But then other reports about some of the ghosts and stuff here at Fort Mifflin is that apparitions of soldiers in continental uniforms are seen. And of course, we don't know. Are those residual? Are those intelligent? We've had this conversation
to me, that
before.
always sounds residual to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I would think residual too, as well as phantom footsteps. And again, could be residual, as well as the sound of marching troops. And then unexplained voices and cries of pain. All these things were so traumatic, they could have imprinted on the environment here and thus leaving that residual imprint.
It sounds a lot like our Civil War claims.
It does. Yeah. Well, we're talking about traumatic war.
So then do these paranormal stories, all sounding similar when it comes to historic war locations, are they similar because this is the type of imprint that is left behind to witness? Or is this power of suggestion? You hear stories about ghost hauntings from war, and now you're in another location where there was war, and our minds creating what we hear about. Is the legend affecting our memory of what we're seeing and experiencing?
That's a good question. It could be for some people, maybe for other people like me. No, because I know what I'm going to see, what I'm going to hear, right? Prepared.
You come from that psychic perspective.
Right. But someone who doesn't have that, and let's just say they go to the fort and maybe they are expecting to see military associated things.
Yeah. So I would think if there's an apparition and you're in a fort, your mind is expecting a soldier because you're in a fort. Now, if you're in somebody's house and it was built in the 1900s, are you going to see a Victorian apparition because that's what you expect?
That's a good point. And here's the thing, quite possibly, and I'll tell you why. So you know that we have investigated all sorts of places, historical places even, some from the turn of the century, Victorian, right? Some from even beyond that. And I will say, I don't know the history. Most of the time, I don't even know the time frame. But I think a person could go in and see, oh, it's Victorian, and a woman is heard screaming. They're automatically going to associate a lady in Victorian. Now, I have been surprised some places that I've gone and I've done my walkthrough, and it may have that history, but maybe I don't see a spirit that's from the 1800s. And then when I find out the history, it kind of leaves you scratching your head. Why would the spirit be here? But doesn't that seem like it's out of place?
Yeah.
So,
And that makes sense for you and your experience. But screaming lady, could that have been a cat in heat in the distance?
oh my gosh.
Look
that's
at the
not-
logical, right? So what
Uh-huh.
animal out there in the woods could make a screaming sound?
But
I mean,
that's
if you
really
step on a
not the
cat
image.
still.
Not the image I wanted in my head, Kathy. Thank you very much. Lord have mercy. I would hope someone could tell the difference between a cat in heat, a
There
screaming
are
ghost.
screams. What is it? There's a certain animal that makes a screaming sound that sounds like a human. I would look into that.
I think some monkeys do, don't they? Like
Not monkeys. I'm talking like a fox.
you're
That they're
talking
known
about
to make
more
a screaming.
local.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have to do some research on that. But again, yeah, it's going to be expected. Back to it. 2 + 2 =
Right.
2, 4. You know what I
So-
mean.
So definitely the fort was witness to some extreme trauma of
Of course.
the war events. History contributes to that reputation. Although underground structures can amplify sounds, making echoes.
Sure.
So normal sounds can sound paranormal, right? It's just not the acoustics that you're used to. And I do believe that there is some sort of pareidolia that happens with your sense of hearing, not just in your vision. So in 1779, American and French forces attempted to recapture the city of Savannah from the British. Now, Savannah, Georgia is gorgeous. I've been there before, and I highly recommend anybody who loves history and the paranormal, anything, because I feel like this whole city is haunted. I mean,
I've heard it.
we talk about New Orleans being haunted, and it's just New Orleans in itself has such vast history and culture. Savannah, to me, I feel is that way. Lots of restaurants, all kinds of history, and wonderful people there, beautiful bed and breakfasts and hotels. And I'm not on the City of Commerce here, or the travel board, but it's
Sure.
just a beautiful place. And if you ever get the chance to visit, you should go. But there was the siege of Savannah, according to Revolutionary history. And this time frame was September 16th to October 18th in 1779. It did also end in a British win,
Mhm.
but I think that's why this plays into some of our paranormal history. Anytime you have a huge defeat, the emotional impact in that defeat could easily imprint that environment heavily.
And I'm going to say I'm jealous. I am so jealous of all these experiences and all this travel that we've gotten to done. I just feel like I'm stuck in like Podunk, Oklahoma.
You feel a little landlocked, I think.
Right.
We-
It's called I've been poor.
That's
and I
our
can't
military-
afford to go.
We were stationed in Georgia for a little while, and it was a couple hours drive to Savannah.
One
So it's-
day, though, I tell myself one day I'm going to travel.
Oh, yeah.
I'm-
We have to drive. It's a beautiful drive across
Yeah.
country. But more than 800 soldiers were killed. Allied soldiers. We had the French helping us too. And this increases the likelihood of hauntings in this area. And not just for Revolutionary War history. There was lots of history that came after we were established as a nation in this area.
Mhm. With all this history that you're talking about, again, like you mentioned, it's considered one of the most haunted cities in America. So you do have people that are reporting these Revolutionary era type haunting reports. So they say, hey, there's apparitions of soldiers seen in military uniforms. They're hearing, again, this phantom cannon fire. They hear disembodied voices and sounds of marching troops. Again, my thought would be residual. Now, disembodied voices, you think those are residual? Some of them were hearing cries and cannon fire. They're hearing that audibly.
The cannon fire is interesting. Now, Savannah's a pretty safe city for the most part, but like any city or town, it's going to have some dangerous areas. So are they hearing gunfire in the distance that they're interpreting as cannon fire? I don't know. It's not that
Maybe.
common to hear gunfire even in a dangerous city, but I guess it depends on which city we're talking about here. But crime could be heavy in some areas, and maybe that's what they're hearing. We don't really have the details of some of these claims. They're very vague. You don't really know exactly where this was, whether they were outside or inside a building. And sounds can be different even inside a building, depending on where they think this cannon fire might be coming from.
Oh, for sure.
There's old architecture here. So if you don't live in an old historic building, yet you're visiting, your ears aren't accustomed to the sounds that you might hear. And in the middle of a city block are all these trees with the beautiful Spanish moss, which legend says the area is haunted.
Why is the moss supposed to hold some sort of spiritual?
I mean, all of Georgia would be considered haunted in that case. The Spanish moss is all over. It's just a beautiful state. I
Right.
used to live there for a period of time, and I love the state of Georgia. The people and the culture, everything is just beautiful there. That's one of the legends. Of course, I'm the skeptic here. So just because there's Spanish moss doesn't mean it's haunted, but
Right.
it kind of adds to the lore. And if you're not from the area and you're visiting, it adds to that spookiness of it. It just is a part of legend. And if you hear the stories, you come in with this preconceived notion that there must be something haunted. Your spidey senses are up when you're visiting these areas. So that can add to it. Plus, the square itself with all the trees in the middle can change the acoustics of sound. Maybe there's somebody on the other side, and just the way their voice carries through the trees could sound like a disembodied voice.
Right. Let's start talking about the end of the Revolutionary War. And look, folks, there was a lot that happened in this war, and we're not going to get into every single bit of it, just doing some highlights. So we talked about the beginning, we got to talk about the end. So this is going to be at Yorktown in 1781. This is Yorktown Surrender Field, and it happened in Virginia.
So this was the final major military engagement. The siege of Yorktown was fought on September 28th and ended October 19th, 1781. American and French troops, like I mentioned, were fighting together, led by George Washington and General Comte de Rochambeau for the France forces.
Whoa, look at you and your French.
Well, that's my English French. But he commanded the French troops. What they did together is they were able to trap the British Army under General Charles Cornwallis's command at Yorktown. They trapped them by land and sea. This forced Cornwallis's surrender of approximately 8,000 British troops on October 19th, 1781. And although the Treaty of Paris wasn't signed until 1783, Yorktown effectively ended major fighting and secured American independence.
Woohoo!
Yes.
I'm proud.
Go America.
America.
Or at least I know I'm free.
Free. There you go. It's all about freedom.
So, visitors to Yorktown, what are they reporting?
They see shadowy soldiers walking around in the battlefield.
Sound familiar?
Yep, residual. They hear drums and military commands.
Once again?
Exactly, residual. And they also witness figures disappearing into the fog.
That sounds like
Interesting.
Gettysburg. So,
Right.
same area, too.
Mm-hmm.
Same part of the country.
And interesting that it's fog that they disappear into.
Right. So, are they seeing some fog that's caught up in a little bit of
Right.
wind? Maybe?
Atmospheric conditions. Yeah.
Mhm.
Who knows? Have they had just too much wacky tobacco or too much alcohol before they see these things? I don't know. Anyway, and then you've got other people who describe seeing George Washington walking the grounds here, where he actually achieved his greatest military victory. So you can imagine this like, we won, we got our independence. Now, you have some people who are going to argue that such a significant moment in the birth of the United States could leave this imprint, and other people are like, it can't. But me, I believe residual, because that would be a lot of energy to imprint into the environment of such a victory, because you can just imagine how relieved and how great this was for
Oh,
them
yeah.
to know
The
in this moment.
emotional victory in
Yes.
this location, I would say, wouldn't that make it one of the more haunted locations?
Mhm.
But most of these claims are in the outdoors again, which is really hard. We don't really investigate a lot in the outdoors just because we know of all the possible contamination that can occur, the weather conditions that can affect photography. So not having the details of what these claims entail It makes it difficult for debunking because there's a lot of assumption we'd have to make on it. But I like how you're kind of on my side with some of these claims.
Don't get too used to it.
I think anybody, if it wasn't you that witnessed it for yourself,
Right.
it's easy to debunk. But
Yeah.
when you witness something yourself, and if you're of logic mind, you probably went through all of those processes.
Mm-hmm.
Here I am being the open skeptic in this episode, trying not to assume what others are witnessing here.
I might say even me with my gifts, if I saw a full-bodied apparition, let's say in military uniform or whatever, my thoughts are going to probably be, oh, residual,
Right.
because of everything. Now, if this thing
because
came
it
up to
trained
me,
you well.
yeah, but it came up to me and started talking, hey, Christy, what's going on? Then I'll be, oh, yeah, okay, not residual. But
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. You kind of have to take everything with a grain of salt.
pretty
Try to look
much.
for the logical. The easiest explanation is usually the correct one.
Right.
So if it's too easy to explain it away, it's probably not paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
But the history gives it credibility for the potential for paranormal in any of these locations.
Oh, absolutely. Even if it's residual, it's still paranormal. And after 250 years, how have we been shaped by all these paranormal reports?
Right. So to go with the theme of the 250th anniversary of the United States of America, our next episode is going to discuss how the paranormal has contributed to American culture.
Do you think that the paranormal has shaped or changed not just American cultures, but cultures all around the world?
I think we've created a lot of cultural influence with immigration over the years. Lots of cultures have been brought here, and I think that significantly has contributed to our paranormal beliefs.
Right.
They brought their cultures with them. So this is the crossroads of the world.
Right.
So we're going to explore that in our next episode. And since it's summer and July and it's busy season and lots of travel for us as well as our listeners,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to start releasing episodes every 2 weeks instead of weekly as we transition through the summer and into the fall season. We may release a bonus episode from time to time, especially in spooky season.
Mm-hmm. I think that
Yes.
would be cool. And maybe at some point we'll go back to weekly again.
So if in the meantime, while we're in our biweekly episode release, if you want to hear more from the Psychic and the Skeptic, you can write into us at psychicandsskeptic@gmail.com or contact us on Facebook or Instagram and give us your topic ideas or write us in with your parastories to potentially be featured on a future episode.
We will do the live psychic readings again coming up in the second year as well. And lots more good stuff. Keep the conversations going.
So you can find us wherever you enjoy your podcasts, and thank you for listening.
Because the paranormal is the normal.
Not yet understood.